If you've been dealing with SIBO, you probably asked this question: what probiotics should I take? And the answers can seem all over the place. Some are going to tell you to avoid probiotics completely. Others are going to suggest to take spore-based probiotics. And yet others are going to recommend Lactobacillus, Bifidobacter, Saccharomyces. But let me ask you something. What if none of these recommendations are wrong, but they're all incomplete? It seems that at some point in the SIBO conversation and process, as you're moving through the multiple phases of addressing SIBO, inherently the probiotic question is going to come up. And this is one of those areas that seems to have a lot of confusion around it because, frankly, there's a lot of conflicting advice out there about that. Some are going to tell you to avoid it. Some are going to tell you to use them. Some are going to suggest that it rebuilds the gut, while others are going to tell you that it's just going to make the situation worse. And there are multiple options to have to filter through here. You've got the spore-based organisms. You've got your traditional bacteria like Lactobacillus and Bifidobacter. And then you've got Saccharomyces boulardii. And many times when someone is looking to deploy one of these probiotic groups in SIBO, they're really uncertain about what the impact of that is going to be. It just becomes more of, I'm guessing of how I'm applying this, and there's really not a core strategy behind that application. However, as we move forward today, my goal in this video is to give you clarity on this process. And what I want to do is explain why your results can differ with different probiotics, why some are better and some are worse in certain applications, what is the timing, and this is probably the most important takeaway from this video, so just go ahead and notate that. You really want to understand the timing of these probiotics for each group of probiotic, and when you look at those factors, this whole process of when to apply these is going to start to make a lot more sense, because you're going to shift from literally guessing to having an understanding of when the application is necessary or warranted. Therefore, you're going to be able to make clearer decisions and use the probiotics that you choose correctly. Before we get too far down the road of talking about these probiotics and timing and things like that, let's talk about why this matters for a moment. And it really comes down to SIBO is not just a single condition. It's not one condition, if you will. It's a process that when you're resolving this, you need to go through phases of the resolution. Early on, you deal with phase 1. This is where the overgrowth dominates and you're trying to resolve the overgrowth. Unfortunately, this is where many times the whole process ends for a lot of individuals, and that's unfortunate because that's really not where the majority of work needs to be done for most individuals. As you get past resolving that overgrowth and you move into phase 2, now we're starting to talk about restoration of the underlying dysfunction, improving motility, optimizing the digestive secretion of acid, enzymes, and bile, supporting the immune system locally in and around the gut, optimizing the functionality of your ileocecal valve, the junction between the small and the large intestine. These phases, and there's actually a third phase in here too, which is resolving the nutrient deficiencies that come along with SIBO, but it's these first two phases that require different approaches. You can't do the same thing in each phase, and you can't think about your application of probiotics being the same in these two independent phases either. So when it comes to probiotics, the real issue is which one is best for the time that you're at in the process. What phase are you in, and how do we align the probiotic with the phase? And is that going to be the best thing for your gut at that exact time? Now that you understand the phases of SIBO, let's walk through the application of various probiotics in each of the phases. And believe it or not, This conversation, this part of the conversation actually begins even before phase 1. So we're going to call this pre-phase 1, which means it's before you're doing any type of active treatment or resolution towards the overgrowth. So before you reduce the overgrowth, this is an important starting point for you, because adding more probiotics here can often make symptoms worse. And the reason that happens is because you've already got an environment that's overgrown and you're adding more to that. And remember, on top of this, you're dealing with impaired motility. So the motility of the bowels is too slow, and there's already too much sensitivity in this environment. There's too many things going on. We want to dampen that. We don't want to add fuel to the fire. So when you start adding more organisms in there, you potentially increase fermentation, you increase bloating, you become more symptomatic, and overall your discomfort just tends to worsen. And if you think through this, it really does align with both the physiology and what the literature says about this. Take a look at this study here that I came across, which shows brain fogginess, gas, and bloating, a link between SIBO, probiotics, and metabolic acidosis. So not only does that point out that giving probiotics in an active SIBO case can create symptoms, but it's also telling us that it's in part doing it through creating a more acidic environment in the body, metabolic acidosis. So when you're adding bacteria to an already overgrown environment, that's going to end up being a problem. The point that you're trying to take away here is that probiotic avoidance is often the best approach when you've got that active overgrowth. Well, if that was pre-phase 1, what about phase 1? Phase 1 is the antimicrobial phase. What's the goal in this phase? Let's restate this. The goal in this phase is very straightforward. We are looking to reduce the bacterial overgrowth in the small intestine. It's very simple and straightforward, right? It's the piece of the puzzle that everyone tends to get right. You're using antibiotics, right? There's various options there. Antimicrobials, there's multiple options in that camp. Maybe you deploy some dietary strategies. FODMAPs being an example on that, if you will, but not the only one. But what really works well in this phase 1 scenario is Saccharomyces boulardii. And it works well because it's a yeast, it's not a bacteria, and it's not going to contribute to bacterial overgrowth. Now, granted, you can have fungal overgrowths too, but even there, it's not going to contribute to a fungal overgrowth because most fungal overgrowths are of a candida nature. We're not talking about candidal species, we're talking about Saccharomyces species. Now, here's the characteristic though that I think really highlights why this one belongs in this antimicrobial phase. And it is that it has been shown to directly support antimicrobial therapies. So literally it can enhance the various antimicrobials. It just makes them more effective. Whether that's an antibiotic, whether that's the herbals, antimicrobials, if you will. Like literally there's studies out there showing that when you combine this with antibiotics, you get greater outcomes than when you use the antibiotic by itself. This is a very dynamic species, and what I'm sharing with you here, how it supports the antimicrobial effect, is really not the only benefit that we see from it. It also is going to modulate or regulate the microbial environment in terms of what kind of species can grow in there, and it's going to enhance the barrier integrity. So we know that a breakdown in the gut barrier often comes along with SIBO. Well, this can be a strategy to help start to resolve that. So when you're looking at this particular organism, you want to use it through the antimicrobial phase, and here's a key point on this, then you want to discontinue it. Now, I need to caveat this and say that in special populations that are more prone to relapse, there may be a case scenario where you would want to use it on a more ongoing basis. But again, that's very special populations. That's not the average person dealing with SIBO, right? That's not the 95% that I'm speaking to in this video. The other thing to note about Saccharomyces boulardii is that more is not better. Consistency is going to beat quantity every time when it comes to this organism. And the last thing I'll say about this particular organism is don't get so hung up on the specific strain of Saccharomyces boulardii. There's multiple strains of Saccharomyces boulardii that can get the job done. Get a product that is reputable. That is what is most important on this. But don't get bogged down in the nuances of it has to be this exact strain of Saccharomyces boulardii. I can tell you firsthand, watching this with patients, you're going to see that as long as it is what is in the bottle is what's you're giving the patient, what it says on the label is what's in the bottle, you're going to get a benefit from using Saccharomyces boulardii. Now, that's what works well here, but let's talk about what doesn't work so well in this phase 1 antimicrobial. And right at the top here is going to be your spore-based probiotics. The reason is that they survive digestion, right? The exact problem that got us into the SIBO scenario in the first place. They germinate in the small intestine. That certainly doesn't sound desirable. And they become metabolically active in the small intestine. These are not what we're looking for here. So that means is that if you're adding bacterial activity to an already overgrown system, that's probably going to worsen your symptoms and just exacerbate instability. That's phase 1. Now we're going to get into phase 2, and remember what we're doing in phase 2. We're restoring the underlying dysfunction that set the groundwork for SIBO in the first place. So the focus has shifted. The overgrowth is resolved and the organisms are back down below baseline. We're restoring the systems that created that overgrowth. So that means that we're going to enhance motility. Maybe we're focusing on the migratory motor complex as a piece of that. Maybe we're looking at enhancing the digestive secretion of acid enzymes and bile, immune function optimization, and we're enhancing the patency, the functionality, if you will, of the ileocecal valve, that junction between the small intestine and the large intestine, so that we don't get a backflushing effect of the contents of the large intestine back into the small intestine. This is what gets a subcategorization as coliform SIBO. So we don't want that. That ileocecal valve is important here. Some of the key principles that we want to think about with this is that, or this is a key principle that we want to think about with this, is that if this is not addressed, you can almost bank on the fact that SIBO is going to relapse. It's going to return. Now, back to the probiotics, this is actually where the spore-based probiotics can fit in. And interestingly enough, they're the biology of why I told you you would not want to use these in phase 1 in that antimicrobial phase is interestingly also the same reasons that you would want to use them in the post-antimicrobial phase, phase 2. Their biology becomes more optimal here because they survive the digestive secretions, they can reach the small intestine reliably, they germinate, they become biologically active there. But the point is that when they're doing that, now they can interact with the immune system and they can start to produce antimicrobial compounds. And because they are transient in nature, they're acting more as a regulator to that environment than they are as directly setting up shop and having any type of stimulatory effect one way or the other. So rather than contributing to an overgrowth here, now what they're doing is they're regulating the environment that's ultimately going to allow restoration of the entire GI system. And remember, they're not what you would consider your primary intervention, and they're not actually essential to use. In fact, I don't really use spore-based probiotics. I'll just say that up front here in my practice. But this is if you're a person who uses them, and from my review of the data that's out there, this is where they make sense to be used at, because they're going to support microbial balance. They're going to reduce the opportunistic organism activity, so meaning the less desirable organisms there. They're going to inhibit their activity, and they're going to create a more controlled environment during this overall functional recovery. So think about that as maybe they're just buying you time until you can do more of the restorative work on the digestive secretions, on the motility, on the immune system locally. And if that's if that's the only role that they carry out, great. They can be an ally in the process. Now, in the intro, I mentioned Lactobacillus and bifidobacteria. That therefore raises the question, well, where do these organisms fit in at? Because they're primarily going to be functioning in the large intestine. Well, they're going to contribute to fermentation and to short-chain fatty acid production. And understand that when we say fermentation, fermentation in the small intestine, not desirable. Fermentation in the large intestine is very desirable. And when you get that fermentation in the large intestine, you get the short chain fatty acid production. This can start to have some systemic benefits across the body. So in your early phases, these organisms are often not going to be tolerated, right? You're just introducing too many organisms into the environment, period here. But in the latter phase, in this phase 2 that we're still talking about right now, they can be introduced cautiously. And I would say the best strategy with these guys is to start with a low dose being 1 to 3 billion colony forming units, so very low. This is completely antagonistic to the thought process of using high dose organisms or high dose products. You don't need that. That's not the point of the probiotic. And maybe the biggest thing that I will tell you with these Lactobacillus organisms or Bifidobacterium organisms is be very strain specific. So don't just use a random probiotic here. Use probiotics that have been shown to have some benefit in SIBO. One that absolutely comes to mind here, and one that I have used here and there over the years, is Lactobacillus plantarum. So, that if you're going to deploy out of this category, that's the one that I would point you towards. But just know that when you're using Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium, there is going to be, the application is going to be somewhat based on tolerance. So if I'm working with someone who's a bit more fragile, I'm probably not going to be leaning into this category. I'm going to be trying to modulate other ways. If I've got someone who seems to be pretty stable, I'll probably go down this road with them if it makes sense. And just acknowledge that compared to a Saccharomyces boulardii, Saccharomyces boulardii is going to be a better option, but that is going to be a transient organism. If you need an organism that's going to have somewhat some staying power, and I'm using that somewhat, then I would say then you might want to look at a Lactobacillus or Bifidobacterium option. There is a phase 3 to this conversation, which we don't want to forget, because this is going to take us back to nutrient restorations. I bring this up as the phase 3 specifically because some literature, rightfully so, has characterized or has given SIBO one of the characterizations of inducing nutrient deficiency. So nutrient deficiencies are a characteristic of SIBO, is a different way to say that. So at this stage, think about where you're at. Your symptoms are controlled, your function is improving, the system is overall more resilient. So now we want to shift the focus. The focus is going to become long-term restoration of the nutrient status and literally supporting the endogenous production of these nutrients. So the key shift here is that we're not just adding probiotics. That's not the goal here. The goal is not to add a supplemental probiotic, but you're trying to support the existing organisms that are already there. So think about it as you're focusing on feeding the microbiota and you're really supporting the large intestine. We're looking for fermentation activity, but we're looking for it in the large intestine at this point. And you can do that through diversifying the diet, appropriate fibers as they're tolerated, nutrient-dense foods, and that can be both animal-based and plant-based options are going to work for this to support the activity of the microbiota. The goal is that you want to support the production of nutrients like your B vitamins, vitamin K, conjugated linoleic acid. These are important nutrients that are impacted with an active SIBO. You want to reinforce long-term resilience. And so in this scenario, think about, or in this phase, if you will, think about feeding versus direct use of a probiotic. So when it comes to probiotics and SIBO, it's not about which one is best. It's about what role, if any, that they play in a specific phase of SIBO. Because the same organism, it can be harmful early on, it can be helpful later, or it can be completely unnecessary at the end of the process. Here's one single follow-up action item that I'll give you. Before you take a probiotic, simply ask yourself, am I still trying to reduce the bacteria? Am I restoring underlying dysfunction? Or am I trying to enhance and replete nutrient levels? Once you answer this, your next step, it's obvious. Probiotics can be helpful, but only when they match the state of your system. Saccharomyces boulardii, that was an organism I suggested could have a key role in overcoming SIBO. If you want a more complete understanding of how this happens, well, check out one of my most popular videos on the screen right now.